Welcome again to our frequent podcast called Wear Many Hats, inspired by Ethan Hawkey. Throughout the year, I, David Punter, the Business Development Director for Hawkey Cleaning and Support Services, shall be interviewing prominent facilities management and procurement subject matter experts across a range of industry market sectors. It is these people with their wealth of knowledge and experience that will inspire the next generation of young professionals. Our objective is to share our guest stories and experiences to help motivate, engage and inspire others into the industry. Through Wear Many Hats podcast, we hope our listeners will gain new perspectives, insights and learn about strategies to develop their careers in the FM procurement business. It gives me great pleasure to introduce
Jonathan Sims.
And you're from?
I'm the Chief Procurement Officer for Equans UK and Ireland.
Fantastic. We welcome you here today for this podcast. So, Jonathan, without further ado, I'd like to just launch into some questions, really. So, what was your journey to enter into a career of procurement?
So mine was a bit of a not such a straightforward journey into procurement. So my background is a chartered surveyor. So straight from school, I joined the family business, which was a construction and maintenance business. And I was with the organisation for about 10 years before part of that business was sold, and I had to go and stand on my own 2 feet in the world. And I joined a company called Shepherd Group in a business development role. Which was an M&E contractor at the time, one of the largest privately owned mechanical electrical contractors in Europe. I had a few years in business development before I was sponsored to do my MBA, which was all about organisational culture and change, which springboarded me into a role in strategic projects.
Okay.
One of those strategic projects was to go and review the procurement function, and pretty much the rest is history. That catapulted me on really to probably the last 10 or 12 years, where I've just had increasingly more senior procurement roles, range of PLCs, private businesses, onto Equans about 4.5 years ago.
Okay, I mean, a very academic background, so an interesting one as well, going from an accountant role to which tends to be a quite quiet back. I don't want to generalise, but a quiet back office role and stuff, to projected into a sales role. That was quite a transition, though, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, the main. I mean, I was fortunate to be given an opportunity at Shepherd's by the exec business development director at the time, and I think when he looked at my profile, the family business, we'd had about 98% of our business with one client. And the role that I was being interviewed for was the key account management role for Costain. It was a £35 million a year account within the context of a £115 million business. So it felt like a good fit that I got that background of looking after one client very, very well.
Okay.
But yeah, it was a stretch at the time, for sure.
Yes, it's just an interesting movement. That's all I just picked up on there. So what is it you now like about your procurement role?
Predominantly for me, it's about the opportunity to develop people and talent, and that's something I'm really passionate about. And I think over the last 4 years, had some real successes within Equans. Rebuilt the senior leadership team for procurement, brought in some really dynamic talent, strong apprentice commitment within the procurement line, and that's a real passion for me. Building people, developing people. So, sorry, how big is your team that you look after at the moment? So we've got about 60 people in the procurement line.
Okay,
we look after spend of about 1.8 billion.
And within those 60 people, there are people that are being apprentices, being mentored through the process, as well as more senior people?
Yeah, very much so. So we've got everything from apprentices that are sort of forging their first steps in procurement, through to we've got people on PhDs, MBAs, and the majority of our individuals are encouraged to do SIPs and get charter status.
Okay. And do you take an active role in mentoring aspects, people within the team?
Yeah, very much so. So I'm an active mentor on our Women in Leadership program,
Okay.
which is something that recently we've launched to really springboard female talent within the organisation. So I'm really passionate about that. And
Fantastic.
And that's been really beneficial for me as well from a reverse mentoring perspective.
That's great. No, it's commendable. And in what industry, just so that our listeners have a little bit more understanding about your current role in your current business, in what industry does your company work in?
So predominantly in the UK, we're split into two primary divisions. So
Okay.
we consider ourselves to be sort of leaders in technical services, FM, and regeneration, and we're really targeting the three main transitions, which is industrial, energy, and digital.
Okay, right. So fully understood. Thank you for that. And which skills are required to do your job, would you say?
I mean, I would say transferable skills. Look, because of my own background,
Clearly.
but we have some pure sort of procurement thoroughbreds that have never really held any other roles than procurement, that just progressed all the way through various different roles.
Okay.
But with some of our apprentices that we brought in recently, are master's degree students that have done law degrees.
Right.
So for me, it's just business acumen. And individuals that are very, very people orientated, very stakeholder focused, and want to make a difference. And to be honest, I'm very, very open on that. That's a broad church, isn't it?
Very much so. I mean, you've got a wide team there as well. So you're covering a lot of the bases, I would imagine, there. So, and what if someone was to ask, what skills are required for your job?
I mean, analytical skills would be one of the top ones on my list. We are a function of finance within Equans, so I report directly to the CFO.
Okay.
We have some significant targets to deliver, so you've got to be able to cope under pressure. It is a performance-driven culture.
Do you like that?
I do personally. I think I've adjusted my style a little bit over the last 4 years to sort of fit into the Equans and prior to that the energy culture, because it is a very performance driven organisation. But I think the rewards are there and the incentivisation is there, and I think within that organisation you can grow and develop.
Okay, I mean, it's interesting you say about performance driven. Because I think some of our listeners who want to go into procurement may not see that as being a high-pressure, performance-driven role. But they're obviously the larger companies that that's a key KPI.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to make a significant contribution to COP, or current operating profit, as we call it. And as a procurement line, we're a major contributor to the financial performance of the UK business.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So, going into a little bit more about you and stuff, Jonathan, what does a typical day look like for you?
I mean, typically it would be liaising with most of my senior leadership team across the functions that we manage. So that's whether that would be support and performance in terms of accreditations of the supply chain, due diligence, onboarding issues, category management, looking at where we are with targets. We have got three main category hubs within the UK, so directs, indirects, ICT and digital. Or it could be working with the quite large operational procurement teams, supporting on issues or opportunities. So
a typical day is liaising with your direct line reports.
And in conjunction with that, clearly, I've got my other stakeholders within the business, from finance through to operations or other support functions.
Okay, so when you've done that liaison and stuff, and had those particular conversations and stuff, what else are you doing?
So it could be driving performance within the teams. The integration activities are a huge priority for me at the minute. So I'm working very closely with colleagues in group level at Paris.
Okay.
So typically I'll probably spend 2 to 3 days a month in Paris. So it's transferring those ambitions into something that's deliverable within the UK.
Okay.
But yeah, varied. It could be recruitment, it could be mentoring, it could be aspects of performance management. So all of those.
So
types
is there
of
a
issues.
lot of aspects of your typical day that's doing reporting elements on back to someone?
Yeah, very reporting intensive, typically.
I get that. That seems to be a common thread in the organisation. So what would you say then to someone by way of advice if they were starting their career off in FM procurement?
I mean, I think it's a fantastic industry would be the first thing I would say, and there are huge opportunities for growth, not only within the procurement line but transversally. So I think there's so many instances and examples within Equans of individuals that have started in one function and progressed throughout the organisation. I think it's remember that we, as a procurement line, we're here to serve the operations.
Correct.
I think that's something that, it's very easy to become a silo as a central support function, but we are, our internal customers are our operational sites. So building those relationships, delivering on what you've committed to, being very visible. They would all be sort of advice and that thirst for continual professional development. There's a lot of support out there and an opportunity.
Okay. So now looking specifically, let's say, at facilities management, do you think has the way that facilities management procurement, has it changed much over the years?
I think it has in a number of ways. I mean, the growth in outsourcing now and the prevalence of it is significantly greater than when I started my career.
Okay,
that creates some challenges and opportunities, but there's a growing demand on the supply chain. So aligning ourselves with the best partners and making sure that we've got the right levels of exposure, the right partners on board, the people that can deliver for us. Changing our approach so we're attractive to the supply chain, we're paying them on time, we're treating them fairly, we're engaging them on the right opportunities in the right timescales.
And do you treat them fairly?
I think we do. We're a signature to the Prompt Payment Code, and the range of SMEs that we've got within our supply chain I think is quite impressive, and we do lots as a tier one supplier to Cabinet Office in terms of supply diversity and supporting our smaller micro contractors.
Okay, and that is commendable. So, again, in terms of the changes in facilities management, you mentioned that there were challenges. Some people say that's problems. In business, we like to call them challenges, of course. What are those challenges then?
I think the current inflationary pressures would be one challenge. I mean, if we look at food. Purely the increases we've seen in food supply in the last 12 months have been very, very difficult for us to manage and mitigate.
Right.
But I think it's the amount of visibility that we also need now of our supply chain and the chain of custody.
Okay.
Particularly where we're bringing in products from China.
Yeah.
When you've probably seen in the news recently, there's 1,000 containers held up in America at this moment in time.
Yes.
And we're under significant pressure from clients to demonstrate that we are at the leading edge of due diligence, that we are, mitigating counterfeit product, we are not exposing ourselves to modern slavery, forced labour. So it's creating a lot more pressures for us to audit effectively our supply chain, and it's making sure that that's not inaccessible to SMEs that want to work for us and want to be on our supply chain, that they can cope with the level of
prohibitive. Of course.
Prohibitive, absolutely.
I mean, it's interesting. So the due diligence of a supply chain would come through, it would be the procurement people that would carry out that due diligence, i.e. the modern day slavery aspects and people being paid the right things and how they're treated and things like that. Is that correct?
For us, it's a real cross-functional effort. So as procurement, we predominantly own it, but we bring in functional experts to obviously vet the information that we've received from the supply chain, whether that's health and safety, whether it's our legal counsel.
Get it.
Just to make sure we've got the relevant people sort of casting their eye over the information that we've been furnished with.
Okay. I mean, it is interesting because I think in all organisations, small or large, the spotlight is getting increasingly on us all to show that we are demonstrating rather than just ticking boxes in those particular areas of governance. So with the advent of online meetings, obviously through the pandemic and things like that, and using Zoom and Teams, do you feel that this has affected the way strong partnerships with suppliers can be fostered?
I think it has. In the sort of the early days of COVID, we did some phenomenal things with our supply chain in really, really short periods of time over Teams. Particularly procuring PPE in the huge volumes that we did and making sure that was provided to the NHS. We did some pretty heroic stuff, and our supply chain were phenomenal, and that was done in unconventional means.
So I think also so did the government, I think. So we have to be careful of that particular one, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. But equally, you're always conscious that there are suppliers that you aren't engaging with in the manner that you would want. And I think since in recent times, we've started to see, particularly with some of our larger suppliers, the events and the sort of supplier events reforming again, and it's great to be face to face with suppliers, and you do forge obviously different types of relationships. So it would be misleading to say there wasn't any impact, but I think we managed that as effectively as we probably could. And it's great that we're sort of back face to face in meetings like this.
Yeah, I think, in conclusion to that, I do agree. I think both Zoom and Teams has its place to speed up certain aspects and that, but I think it doesn't do away with the face-to-face, the whites of the eyes, and those particular types of engagement, particularly if we're in a people business. So that's just my comment on that, really.
I would agree.
So do you think, Jonathan, that COVID and the way we now work has kept suppliers and procurers more at arm's length than before?
I think that there are certain challenges with trying to run certain activities remotely, I would think, and it's easy to be blunt over more blunt over a Teams call than it is face to face. But I think we've been able to sort of manage that as effectively as we can, and we're fortunate that with our PSL, I think we've got some very strong kind of embedded relationships, and whether that's been activities over Teams or face to face when we could, we've kept that core of suppliers very close to our organisation, and There's been very little churn and change in that over the last 2 or 3 years, which is probably testament to the fact we've been able to maintain relationships.
Great. That is good. So, Jonathan, I want to ask you, what do you think that is the next big thing in procurement for us to look out for?
It was some of the aspects we spoke about earlier. So I'm sit on an all-party parliamentary group at the minute on AI. And we're looking particularly at end-to-end supply chain assurance and how AI may play a place in us being able to sort of validate those aspects of due diligence more quickly. So we were leaning on a wine organisation, interestingly, that's been very effective in doing that and eliminating counterfeit product. But I think it's other issues as well in terms of supply diversity. So we have lots of positive pressure, I would say, from, again, Cabinet Office in terms of making sure that we are appealing to female-owned suppliers, minority ethnic-owned suppliers. And then it's broader equality, diversity, inclusions, not just within the supply chain, but within our own teams, the people that we're able to attract into Equans, the speed in which we're able to promote people, how we are addressing the gender pay gap. These are all topics now that are far more at the forefront of procurement than they were 4 or 5 years ago, or maybe even more recent times. That
is very interesting. You touched upon artificial intelligence and how you're looking more in detail at that. And you explained how you talked about elimination of counterfeit product. Can you expand upon that?
Yeah, so at the parliamentary group, there's a number of organisations or experts that were brought to the table. And there was one organisation that had moved quite heavily into that field. So it was basically tracking the assurance of the product and tagging product all the way through the full chain of custody. So we know that what's left a wine production facility in one part of the world is actually the same product that we're getting at origin, basically.
Oh, okay. I get it. So it's looking at it more for a product-based thing.
Yeah, the full chain of custody and visibility of where a product is at all points in its journey through the supply chain. So that was a really innovative project, and I think how we transfer that into our business is I won't say I've got all the answers now, but it's calling upon those kind of innovative suppliers that are at the forefront of that and looking at the technology and thinking, look, how can we adapt this into what we do?
I mean, it is encouraging to see that the government is also reaching out to industry expertise and recognise that this is an area of change.
And it's what's refreshing about that for me as well is it's not only bringing industry in, you've also got academia there.
Yeah,
and I think it's that kind of three-legged stool is quite useful in solving some of these bigger problems.
Definitely. Okay, moving on a little bit now onto EDI, equality, diversity, and inclusion issues. How important are the EDI issues affecting today's procurement decisions?
They're affecting procurement decisions, supply chains, and our own internal processes and thinking, I suppose, to some extent. So I spoke to you about the reporting pressures now on the diversity of our supply chain is a constant pressure.
Okay.
So we're working with organisations like the Sustainability School and the Supply Chain School, having workshops and meetings with more diverse suppliers and trying to understand how we can be more attractive to them as an organisation, how we can unlock barriers. But we're doing some soul searching internally as well in terms of how can we address some of those issues within our own organisation. So currently we're actually pushing a shadow board project through where we're looking at bringing individuals from our networks, whether that be LGBTQ plus or single parents networks or our talent communities, to think, how can we create a platform for younger, more diverse talent and give them that exposure to the exec, get them working on, some really interesting projects that's kind of fast forwarding their careers 4 or 5 years.
Okay. And I don't want to sound flippant here, but isn't that just a tick box exercise?
Not for us. It could be. And I think if the individuals at the end of that sort of 12-month cycle or 18-month cycle feel that they're making lots of recommendations to the business that we then never enact, it will very quickly become a tick box exercise. But I think the art form in that is really capturing the new thinking and kind of using that to re-educate our own exec and bring that different dynamic to the table.
So does it have senior exec approval, or does it have eyes on that? Or
yes,
is it...
So this is a very, very new initiative at the minute. So we've got a launch of this in Leeds. It's next Thursday with our talent leaders, our EDI team, but ultimately it's sponsored by the CFO and it will be driven by the finance exec. And I think if we can prove concept there and drive some really interesting outcomes, we'd look to replicate that at a higher level within the organisation and really give it the profile that I think it needs.
Okay. And have you won any sort of awards, accreditations in this area yet?
No, I don't think we have currently, but I think
Would you look to?
Yeah, I think we'd really want to target that in future awards, be it SIPs or other governing bodies, really.
Okay. Well, that is encouraging to hear. Just moving on now to the importance of sustainability issues with suppliers that you work with. Basically, how important are they?
So what's interesting is I think I mentioned to you earlier that we've recently been acquired by the Bouygues Group. Yeah. And in the UK, the sustainable development and procurement within Bouygues is one organisation. So I think that probably demonstrates to you how important and interlinked that is. So it really is. I mean, the vision of Equans moving forward is to be the sustainable FM contractor. So I think that really is kind of central in our vision.
Okay. Are you still going to? Sorry to interrupt. Yeah. Are you still going to keep the Equans name, or are you going to? Is that going to morph into?
Still to be determined in
decided.
terms of
Okay.
how they want to move that forward. So at the minute, the two entities are sat side by side in terms of Equans, Bouygues Energy and Services, to be determined above my pay grade.
The normal acquisition process, they normally sit side by side, and then eventually one drops off or something like that. Yeah. No, that's interesting.
But that best practice, and I think that the feedback that they've had from clients and from external audit in terms of the benefit of that sitting as one interconnected function, I think is really going to drive some benefit. And the stuff that we're seeing that they're doing with suppliers in terms of sustainability is really quite interesting.
I mean, it would be interesting to see of the two organisations, obviously the one that's acquired you, where the crossover is in those particular areas of both EDI and sustainability and stuff, and shared information and things like that. So it would be interesting. I wait to read your sustainability reports going forward. What would you say is the next trend in procurement that suppliers like us, Hawkey Cleaning and Support Services, need to wake up to?
I mean, what I would say is I think sometimes that's a two-way street, and maybe sometimes as a tier one contractor, it's about us waking up to some of the things that you guys are doing. Because I think generally we have some really innovative solutions that are driven by our supply chain. I think we need to give the supply chain credit that there are very few issues that we're wrestling with as an organisation that they aren't fully aware of.
Okay.
But a couple of things that probably are in my mind around that is what technology and how that can help us as a not only a tier one contractor, but as a supply chain. So again, touching on some of the issues regarding capability, capacity, exposure levels, taking duplication and waste out of the process, making sure we're inviting you to the right tenders at the right time, in the right level of competition. Keeping an eye on your financial performance, so we aren't overloading you, and we're kind of picking up any signs of distress. And then I think the kind of the talent war is another big ticket item, not only internally but within the supply chain, making sure that we are the client of choice that our suppliers want to work for, because there is a lot of choice out there.
There is. Yeah. And I think that people, and increasingly, I'm not just putting this on to young people, but people are deciding on those companies and organisations they wish to work for and those that they don't. It's not all about the money aspect and things. It's about the culture and all the other tick boxes as well. So, Jonathan, I always ask people this question, and it's not a negative in any way, but it's always if you were to have your time again. What's your biggest regret in your career to date?
I think, interestingly, it was probably spending as long as I did in the first role.
The family business.
Family business. So whilst I had a fantastic time,
no one to report to, no issues, no KPIs, no targets. I'm sure sounds like a dream.
I'm sure as Ethan will echo that when it's family money, those pressures can be heightened. But I think whilst that was a fantastic experience, probably a little bit of self-doubt at that early point in your career in terms of your capability, moving from what is a relatively small business into, the Shepherd's was a £700 million group at the time, so it's a significant step.
Okay.
Proving yourself to a set of stakeholders that aren't family. I would have done that earlier, I think, and the benefits that I got of sort of being in different organisations, working in different functions, I really felt that I was accelerating the career once I'd taken that step.
Okay. But, looking on a slight positive, I always like to, I'm a salesman, so I like to have a positive spin on things as well. But surely in your family business, there were certain things that you were able to take on board that allowed you, when you moved to a bigger company, as well.
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of responsibility in the family business very, very early, which is a unique set of circumstances that you get. Very, very close to the decision makers. Decisions happen very, very quickly. Whereas I look at the organisation, now there's a lot of stakeholders you've got to take with you. Things are not, they don't turn on a dime in terms of speed.
No.
Speed. So yeah, there's benefits and
yeah, and also probably within the family business, a decision can be across the dinner table, can't it?
Absolutely.
Really? Over a Sunday lunch, maybe. So. Jonathan, on the sort of the other side of the coin, what's your greatest achievement in your career to date?
I think the thing I'm probably most proud of is when I joined the business about 4.5 years ago in the CPO role, which was a big step up for me. I was also dealing with some new sectors, so FM procurement was completely new.
Right.
So that was a really interesting experience, but for whatever reason, I coincided that with doing my PhD at exactly the same time. So that first 3 years,
did the company fund that, or you did it independently?
I actually had a scholarship to do my PhD, but I was very much supported by the organisation, and they contributed to the data collection, which was really useful. But that was a really intense time with particularly with family. It's a big job. Lots of stuff going on at university, but sort of getting that over the line in the first 3 years probably of the change and transformation that we did, delivering the numbers, growing the teams. I think that's something that I look back and I think, that's probably a career highlight, really.
Certainly is. Do you feel, I mean, I haven't put this question to you before, but do you feel that is a springboard for something even bigger? Maybe sitting on the government or something like that to shape things from a commercial perspective or something? I mean,
it's opened lots of opportunities for me. So I do a number of roles outside of just my Equans role. So I'm an affiliate professor at Emily University over in Paris, which was a spin-off, obviously, from the academic work.
Okay.
I do a visiting fellow role at Nottingham Business School and Durham Business School. And they've been platforms, obviously, for the involvement I've had on the parliamentary work with the House of Lords. But I think that I'm hoping it's just going to be a springboard for further progression within the Equans organisation. There's a lot of exciting roles at a corporate level, and these are bigger roles looking over multiple business units. So somewhere on the horizon, maybe.
Okay, very very interesting. And I'm looking forward to watching where that goes as well. Finally, Jonathan, what things in life, it could be work, it could be leisure, gives you the greatest satisfaction and enjoyment?
It's probably really simple in terms of spending time with family and travelling. So they're my two passions. Two boys getting slightly older now, 17 and 15.
Okay.
So spending time with those guys.
Do they want to go into procurement?
I don't think so. Interestingly, I've involved the youngest boy with some of the parliamentary work. He's on the youth panel for that. I think he's making his mind up about how exciting procurement is, but they've got their bit definitely in business, I think, but we'll have to see.
And on travel, you say you like travelling?
Yeah, absolutely. So we get away as often as we can. So a few things in the pipeline this year.
So some overseas travel. Where do you like?
So Dubai is a family favourite if we can, but equally sort of Greece and over in Spain and just the staples really.
Fantastic. So, well, that brings us to the end of our 9th episode of Wear Many Hats podcast. We hope that our listeners have found this interesting, as I have. We'd like to thank Jonathan Sims for taking the chair today. It's been both thought-provoking and engaging. We welcome our support from our listeners and also the feedback that they give. Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.